I didn't have an option to learn dance. I remember as a child standing in front of the mirror, like child of around 8 years old, and imitating the dance, which I have seen in the temple festivals, in the school annual days, things like that. And my mother used to dance because she used to do Tiruvadirakali and this kind of, community kind of dance. So I've seen dance. Was so fascinated with it. I don't know why, but I was also good in sports. I was, when I was in college, I was a runner, middle distance, 400, 800, and also was a cricket player and a shuttle badminton player. But I had to wait until I went to university when I was in the college hostel, so I could save up some money and go almost clandestinely to learn dance. And that was from Kalamandalam Kshemavati. And I was the only student, male student, so the girls used to watch from the windows, who is this one guy coming, and I used to go in my track pants to learn dance. And her husband was filmmaker, and we had things common to speak about. I was fascinated. I was very much into film and theater, and my friends were in literature and things like that. So the college in Trichure helped me to get a wider understanding about theater, film, and dance, of course, and literature. So that was the time when Shankara Pillai set up Thrissur School of Drama, and it was at its peak. And we used to see Antigone and many kind of production. And Trichure also had a very good film club, that used to show great movies from Bergman, Osu, Kurosawa, Fellini, Pasolini, many. So we had that kind of film appreciation on the other hand. And some of my friends in literature, like poets, G. Shankara Pillai and Atur Ravi Verma. So I had a very rich time in Trichure, and used to go to Irinjalakuda and to see all-night Kathakali performances, and also in Trichure, and sometimes even to Kalamandalam. So, but my dance practice was very clandestine, because I never performed in college days. I was learning. On the other hand, I had also sports training, so intense training also. So learning dance, but practicing in my hostel room. My friends used to help me, so we closed the door, and I used to practice, and that's how I started. So I decided to go to Chennai at the pretext of learning computer science. So so that I did for around 10 months in the evening, 1 hour, but the rest of the days I was learning dance full time and with the Dhananjayans. So our classes used to start at 6 o'clock in the morning. Then I used to do beginners class, the next class, then the next class. Then they used to say, no, now you stop. Look, then afternoon I was studying Kathakali at Kalakshetra as a part-time student with Janardhan sir, Balagopal sir, and all of that people. When I started learning dance, I was already questioning it, because on the one hand, I was very fascinated by the physical language of Bharatanatyam and the fantastic expressions of Kathakali and all those things I have seen. And in Chennai, with the Dhananjayans also, I learned many folk forms from different parts of the country. So I was fascinated about these languages, but the content bothered me. Why am I depicting these stories about Krishna stealing butter and a girl pining for her husband and this kind of business? I'm thinking like, this has nothing to do with my life, but I'm fascinated by the language. I started working with the Kuthupadre and working with Terikuthu artists and I remember in 1986 in the National Theatre Festival, we did a movement adaptation. Sambandam Kanapathambiran's son, very eminent Terikuthu artist, and myself, using Bharatanatyam and folk techniques, we did a theatre adaptation of Muthuswami's Shivarottigal, or the Wall Posters. That's a name of the production. And so then I got to know about many theater practitioners also trying to find new language. That was a time when Ford Foundation supported many theater companies, and they were all exploring contemporary theater language and probably influenced by traditions. See, one of the problems what I encountered, which I later realized, I remember going to Ratan Thiam's place as a research, like 2 days or 3 days, standing in a train going from Cochin all the way to Manipur in unreserved compartment and all, trying to find out what is the way they are exploring. So soon I realized all of that exploration is actually putting, say, Kalasham from Kathakali into production or a folk movement into a production. There was no processing. I think contemporary vocabulary develops with a different kind of training. Even though I have the highest respect for classical and folk traditions, but the purpose is slightly different. And one has to understand that. And that was the case when I worked with the Chandralekha also. I was in the first production of Ankika. So we were there right at the beginning exploring this. So the mode of exploration was looking at different traditions like Kathak, Kalaripayat, Yoga, Bharatanatyam, and pare it down to take away all the ornamentation, pare it down. But the problem was that still the language, the body language, was primarily those same languages, And I was looking for how to find a contemporary language. Then I remember seeing Merce Cunningham in Chennai, and so I asked some of my students, some of them were Americans as well, and what is he trying to do? I was fascinated by the work, but I couldn't claim that I fully understood. I was very fascinated. So then they said they don't know. So I felt maybe I have to find out. So I went to London. I decided to go to London because some of my friends came from London. They saw my performance with the Kalakshetra, because I performed in some dance drama, and also with the Dhananjayans in the class and as well. So by that time, I have done my Arangetram, the solo performance, whole evening performance of Bharatanatyam. So they encouraged me to apply to different places in London. I thought maybe there already exists a wheel. I don't have to reinvent the wheel. Maybe learn to use it, That prompted me to go to London. And I got admission to all the places I applied, and I chose London Contemporary Dance School. We, at that time, we had primarily Graham technique, a little bit of Cunningham, some release, and Laban movement, and a bit of Tai Chi, and ballet, of course, and stagecraft, and some history of dance and music. Outwardly copying something is not the key. The key is to understand the inner dynamics of the movement, the intention behind it, the qualities with which you have to execute it. So I think I was, in the beginning at least, I was not quite at ease with ballet. And the contemporary was relatively easier, but still, for example, in the triplet, in this walking across the floor with the Graham technique, I remember, because in Bharatanatyam you are always asked to lift the leg up, put it up and down. So, because in this one you have to drag the foot through the floor, and in your mind immediately you lift it, and then you get at least in the beginning 2-3 weeks there was those kind of issues. But more shocking was, I would say, the costumes and the proximity of boys and girls, because we were always told to be away and not touch each other and this kind of thing. So that was the first this thing. And internet and other things were not so common. Everything was new. I would say Attakala has a kind of a language. I wouldn't claim it all to me, that language. I think it's a combination of working together by many people. Of course, I was leading it. That doesn't mean I have the sole authorship of the whole thing. See, the time I spent in London gave me a distance from Indian traditions. That gave me the time to objectively analyze it. Because here I was so close to it. It's almost like a Carnatic musician always have to have the tala. Something do without a kind of tala cycle probably is almost kind of, I don't know, sacrilegious for somebody like that. So similarly for people who are only trained in classical dance, to free their own spine, to kind of soften the extremities of the bodies, and to shift the center from only solitary, one unitary center. That and all probably was anathema for classically trained dancers. So I had to unlearn all that, and then whenever I need it, I can always call it and recollect it. That's not an issue. But that distance gave me an possibility of an objective, relatively objective analysis, and maybe deconstruct some of those things to find out what is the concept of body and principles of movement governing Indian traditions. Then also, on the other hand, what are the principles of movement and governing some of the other traditions I've learned. I have done workshop with the Lucinda Childs, I've done workshop, I've seen many works from, Pina Bausch to Teshigawara to William Forsyth to, Deviate, Lloyd Newson, or many people like that. So over the years, I had that chance. So I was constantly analyzing, and then I had a company in London. So I was working with the dancers from around the world. So always trying to get these Indian semiotic ideas formulate in my choreography, then always was a difficulty because those dancers were not trained in this. So I was constantly battling and crystallizing my thoughts as to how the training strategies has to be. So that kind of experience working in London and other parts of the world, like I used to travel to Europe, Canada, and Australia, Japan, and other places, and interacting with the many artists, not only from dance and theater, but also from other disciplines like music and visual arts, helped me a lot. And I remember I used to come to Paris, for example, to see Ariane Manushkin's work and to Peter Brook's work, and I've seen Nina Gawa, then people like the famous Russian director, Vasiliev, or Robert Wilson, Robert Lepage, people like that. So all of that gave me a kind of an understanding as to how to work out a language, how to develop a center. And the center, this was always my aim, to set up a center, because I primarily made up my own curriculum. There was nobody to guide me. I made my curriculum. I used to go to, say, Gujarat to look at Garba dance and Ras and things like that. To Manipur, I told you, I learned Tangta, for example. All of that on my own volition. In Kerala, for example, Patayani. I used to spend days there, always kind of trying to research and find out. So this helped me to make an idea as to how to organize a curriculum. And I think that has helped in the training program, in Articulatory's training program. Sometimes people don't realize, like for example, if it's a filmmaker is using a camera or an editing technique or a light, which might be produced by Sony or Fuji or other kinds of people, that doesn't necessarily make that his work Western or Japanese or other kinds of things. It is actually the stories or the images or the narrative you have is the key. What kind of work you are doing. Anybody who's living in India today has got a complex set of identities. It is not defined by the geography of the place he or she is born and the language, but in the process of growing up, you are accumulating different things from different parts of the world, and that is your culture today. And I think my attempt, at least, is to gravitate all these kind of developments to an evolving identity, Indian identity. So that I wouldn't say a geographically defined identity. I would say it is a cultural continuum. And quite a few of us are now working in contemporary traditions in India. I would say we occupy a suspended space, oscillating between the tradition and the contemporary and maybe what is to come. I'm primarily interested in the sensorial narrative, not a literal narrative. The story per se, the literal story per se, is not what I'm interested in. It's almost like poetry, like a haiku, if you say a kind of a woman standing in front of her hut at a distant land and there is moonlight or something, then you get a picture of a place, landscape and everything. So there you don't have to give all the details. So for me, I often say, if you smell something, you have a sensorial experience. It's not telling a story. If you hear a music without words, you still have an emotional experience to it. If you see a painting, even if it is abstract, you have, if you are sensitive enough, you have an emotional response to it. And dance is a form which is unraveling thousands of images every second, in every minute. So of course, if you have that kind of sensitization and literacy in dance, you can also kind of decode some of the codes. Any art form is a pattern making, and is understanding the pattern is the key. So there, I would say my primary commitment is to have a sensorial narrative where there can be something can be communicated, and the themes I work with often differs my response to something that hit a chord with me. So always I have a storyboard most of the time, unless it is a small performance, small piece. In a full evening piece, I work with a storyboard, conceptualize something. Then of course, once all the collaborators meet, each one of us has a different interpretation. The original storyboard it become irrelevant or less relevant, and then the languages we create or improvise and create become the tools with which we communicate and weave this new production. For me, when I was in London, I remember working with the idea of dance on camera. So there was our trainer was from BBC, and so we were making short films about dance. And that time itself, I felt, this camera allows you to focus on something, like a Kathakali's eyes, for example, or a gestures, even though within the large thing, you just focus on that part sometimes. And I think this idea of focusing on something with the possibility of digital technology, and on the other hand, creating an interactive scenography and possibility of offering non-linear dramaturgy. So new technology is actually creating, some people would argue, a new digital self. A post-industrial kind of a new self is evolving. Our thinking has changed actually in the era of computers and mobile phones and all. That digital technology is not necessarily something I purposefully brought in. It was there. It was there as a form of thinking and visualizing. So it came naturally. The Art Gallery Center in Bangalore, even though Art Gallery started in 1992 in Cochin, in Aluve, and then to Cochin. In 2001, we set up this space with a corpus fund from Ratan Tata Trust. So since then, my aim was to train a group of dancers. I was sick and tired of the lack of physicality among the Indian dance practitioners, so I wanted to have a really physically agile and capable kind of dancers generated from India. There was no money, so I was paying the dancers from my own pocket. Even though there was no work, some people used to call us to come and give workshops in schools, and they said, it will give you exposure, but we can't pay you. I said, no, if you can pay your teachers, if you can pay your administrative staff, you can pay the dancers. Otherwise, don't have it. So I'm paying them because that was the first step to make it professional. So whoever works get paid for it. And that, so even though we didn't have work which will earn us money, we were still practicing, and I was investing my money. I remember at that time, I used to even cook food for them, lunchtime, and we used to have bicycles to come for the rehearsal. So it was not here first. It was in the suburbs, in kind of with the pillars in between and things like that. And the first performance we did was an 8-minute piece about telephones. And for an architectural conference. Subsequently, we performed in somebody's garden and things like that. And then we got this place. It was a garage with many little rooms. We demolished everything and made this hall. 2001, we moved here. In 2006, we launched the 1-year diploma program. And that itself, so many people said, 1 year we have to be. So that is from 8 o'clock in the morning till around 6 in the evening. So in Kathakali, how many years one has to train? See, I think in the contemporary thing, people thought you just can copy something and go and perform something. Yeah. So then it took a few more years. Like this is the third batch, I think, third or fourth batch in the second year. There is plenty of opportunities to teach now, and many corporate houses also have dance teachers. Some of the colleges have started, like even Christ College and all. We are also teaching, for example, in the IIT, in the Indian Institute of Technology, the premier technological institute in the country. In Hyderabad, we do a general course, but we also do many credit course for the design department. We recently did a performance for them with them. So these opportunities, and we are teaching for National School of Drama. We are also teaching for the Srishti School of Art and Design. So there are many opportunities if one wants to teach. And in terms of performance, for example, those who wish to stay with the company, not everybody can. We will have also an audition for that, so, or you have to be invited. Because everybody cannot join that. And some will do that, some join other companies. Until recently, until 1 year ago, I think we had a company with a regular monthly salary and things like that. And it's becoming very difficult because the aspirations of younger dancers are also quite high, rightfully so, I would say. We came to a consensus that saying that maybe that is not the best model in the changing time. So it's from almost 1 year ago, I think, now we are now working on a project base. One person who has given me a very good example, Kirpadathil Kumar Narashan. He said, artist is like a creeper. You need a big tree to grow on. Training is one thing, and seeing the repertory company working another. But what is the context of contemporary dance? That's the question. You have to have a literate audience, dance literate audience. So Bangalore hasn't seen, in 1999, I started the first choreography residency. Since then, subsequently, every year we started the choreography residency called Facets. So in order to give them a kind of a safe environment to create interdisciplinary work. There was mentors in choreography, dramaturgy, music composition, light design, and digital arts. So it was fantastic opportunity, and they were given support to create the work and then present it in the biennial. So festival was the next step, because we need to create a visual culture, a viewing culture of seeing very cutting-edge work from around the globe. And that prompted me to start the festival. So presenting world-class work from other choreographers, from other cultures, from other parts of the world, to propel all of these things, we did a great seminal research called Nagarika. Nagarika literally can be roughly translated as of civilizational dimension. This was to understand what is the concept of body and principles of movement embedded in Indian physical and performance traditions. We started with Bharatanatyam, the Kalakshetra style of Bharatanatyam, with Professor C.V. Chandrasekhar, Dhananjayans, and Leela Sampson, and many practitioners. And these masters were explaining each and every movement. Even Bharatanatyam students were gobsmacked. I have a completely interactive digital platform. We had around 140 hours of footage, which are edited down to 5-6 hours, with a very logical kind of movement unit, movement sequence, explanation by the masters, and the contextual information. Similarly, we did it with Kalaripayattu, northern style of Kalaripayattu, in which I'm also trained. So to understand the concepts and principles, because that concepts and principle become the kind of bedrock of my kind of language as well, because even though contemporary improvised movement are used, we always process with some kind of overarching concepts which has got a lineage to Indian traditions, And predating all of this, we did a research in teaching methodology in Indian performing arts. Kirpadathil Kumar Narashan, we have done many recordings with him, Amanuru Madhava Chakyar, and many the Pava Kutu Kathakali and the Pava Kathakali artists, and also with people like Leela Sampson as well, to understand what is the process of creating a masters in Indian traditions. At what stage each of these components, physical training, mudras, abhinaya, Chuliatam, or the music, or the makeup, and finally the Ranga Pravesham, and all of that. What are these stages? How does it help? So that all kind of contributed to the development of Attaccalari as an institute, as a training institute, as a production house, as an organization who disseminate work through outreach activities as well as with performances, and presenting through the biennial as well. So it's kind of coming together in a way. But I don't know what is the future, because there has to be an injection of huge resources to this process. I think that is lacking. From the outside, people don't know how much work has gone into making Attaccalari. And I am thankful to so many friends who have given their time. People from literature, philosophy, cinema, theater, even the young dancers who come out of here, they don't know about that. And I think this is an interesting part of the history, how that is possible. No, thank you.